Hey, Olive, Arlo, and Frank. Grandpop coming to you from the living room in Jack's Beach, chilling with my Net Bible Reader's Edition. Today we're going to look at the story of Ishmael in Revelation chapter 16. Now, Arlo and Frank, the religion that you grew up in was based on Abraham. That the blessing went to Abraham through, and then into Isaac, and then Jacob, and down all the way to Jesus. Olive, your mother grew up in that same tradition. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all the way down to David, King David, Jesus in the New Testament. Then we will get to all that stuff as we go through the Bible. But your dad grew up in a tradition in Islam that believes that blessing went from Abraham to this young fella here, Ishmael. And Ishmael is going to be a major player in the Bible for the next few chapters. And we'll get into who he is and how he came into being and all that kind of stuff now. So chapter 16 says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, remember, they're Abram and Sarai right now. They will be Abraham and Sarah at some point in time. And while I'm thinking about the tradition that your dad grew up in, Olive, you have a grandfather named Ibrahim, which is the Arab version of Abraham. And you have an aunt, Sarah. It's pronounced a little bit different because it's the Arab version of the name, but it's basically the same name. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not given birth to any children, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, since the Lord has prevented me from having children, have sexual relations with my servant. Perhaps I can have a family by her. And Abram did what Sarai told him. Imagine that. Yeah, go be with this woman. And the guy was like, yeah, I don't want to do it, but I can do that. This sounds really, really bizarre, but it's not. Back then, if you didn't have somebody to pass your title, whatever, your money and land and all that kind of stuff too. You know, if your wife didn't give you children, you would try with a servant, and so at least that would be half an heir to whatever you are in that society, and so they would have children that way. That sounds weird because today it is weird. Trust me, nobody's going to tell you that, oh yeah. So we have this maid from Guatemala, and yeah, go have kids with her. No wife's going to do that today. So after Abram had lived in Canaan for 10 years, Sarai, Abram's wife, gave Hagar, her Egyptian servant, to her husband to be his wife. He had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. Once Hagar realized she was pregnant, she despised Sarai. Then Sarai said to Abram, you have brought this wrong on me. I allowed my servant to have sexual relations with you, But when she realized that she was pregnant, she despised me. May the Lord judge between you and me. So Sarai is now blaming Abraham for this, Abram. And it is a mess. Now, there was another option that was available the whole time. God said, I'm going to make a great nation out of you. And that didn't mean I'm going to make a great nation out of you with your servant. He said that Sarai would give birth to an heir. So Abram jumped the gun. Sarai jumped the gun. They could have just believed God, but no, they didn't. So what do you think Abram's going to say? Abram said to Sarai, since your servant is under your authority, do to her whatever you think best. Then Sarai treated Hagar harshly, so she ran away from Sarai. And, I mean, this really doesn't make any sense to me. But things in the Bible don't make sense to me. They don't have to make sense all the time. If you thought this was the plan, why would you say to your wife, well, you can do whatever you want? I mean, this was her property. They say servant, but it was the equivalent of a slave. You were bonded under that person. The Lord's angel found Hagar near a spring of water in the desert. So Hagar split and like went out into, they'll say the wilderness in some versions of the Bible, but it's the desert. And I've been out in this area. It's barren and it's hot. People in Miami go over there and go, oh, that's the hottest place I ever was. And they live in Miami. The Lord's angel found Hagar near a spring of water in the desert, the spring that is along the road to Shur. He said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? God asks questions a lot of times, but he knows the answer already. But he asks questions so that he wants to see if you know where you've been and where you're going. She replied, I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai. Then the Lord's angel said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her authority. I will greatly multiply your descendants. The Lord's angel added, so that they will be too numerous to count. Then the Lord's angel said to her, you are now pregnant and are about to give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your painful groans. And I think Ishmael might mean God with you. He will be a wild donkey of a man. So he's talking about Ishmael now. He will be hostile to everyone, and everyone will be hostile to him. He will live away from his brothers. So Hagar named the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God who sees me. For she said, here I have seen one who sees me. That is why the well was called Bir Lahai Roy, not Bir Haley Roy. Bir Lahai Roy. It is located between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar gave birth to Abram's son, whom Abram named Ishmael. Now Abram was 86 years old when Hagar gave birth to Ishmael. You know, I was hard on Abram at the beginning of this chapter, but he's 86 now. And this is the only son that he has. Because Ishmael really was his son, legally, in that society. he was his son. No ifs, ands, or buts. But he wasn't the son. He wasn't the son that was promised. Now, like I said, Olive, the tradition that your dad grew up in, they believe differently. That's why we study the Bible. You're going to have to make up your own mind. Which one is true, or maybe you'll decide that neither of them are true. I hope not. I hope not. And you should listen intently and study. And don't let anybody, including me, tell you something and you just take it at face value. Ask follow-up questions, do research, and pray. Pray. Both traditions, Islam and Christianity, they both pray. They both pray to God. They call God something different, but they both pray to God. And that being said, peace out.